Welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast. My name is Anthony Oliver, and today we're going stateside to catch up on what's happening in the US as the global superpower prepares for the latest iteration of the Donald Trump Presidency, and as Los Angeles struggles to contain and recover from catastrophic wildfires. My guest today is Steve Burrows, the Institution of Civil Engineers representative for the west coast of the USA. Steve is based in San Francisco and has had a global career in engineering, working for Arup and then Aecom and WSP on projects including the Birdsnest Olympic Stadium in Beijing and the Apple headquarters in California. But right now he's an independent consultant helping clients to deliver better outcomes from their investments and hopefully in a lower carbon way as well. But after 40 years in the region, if anyone has his finger on the West Coast pulse, it's this former Liverpudlian, Steve. Well, the Trump presidency is certainly a massive moment for the US and a massive moment for the rest of the world. Huge consequences geopolitically and huge impacts economically if Trump follows through on his election promises. And huge impacts for the infrastructure professionals as the administration switches track from renewables and net zero ambition back to the drill baby drill and oil and gas centric policies of the past. But meanwhile, of course, the very real impact of global climate change has arrived in Los Angeles, which is still battling what is certainly one of the worst natural disasters to have hit the city in its history. So far, 25 people have been killed, with many more still missing, and tens of thousands of properties destroyed as fires rage across the parched, dry tinderbox driven by unprecedented high winds. It is truly a scene of tragedy on a massive scale. From an infrastructure perspective, both events raise huge questions for the US, not least in a country that's massively underfunded and under-maintained its infrastructure assets, but also one that's had world-leading ambitions at one point for a low-carbon development. So make no mistake, there are huge challenges ahead as professionals attempt to steer the path towards safe, productive and resilient infrastructure. So how are they coping? Well, let's find out. Steve, welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast.
Thank you very much. What an introduction.
Well, I tried to set the scene, Steve. It is a big week, though. It's a big week for the US. And, the presidential inauguration of Donald Trump happening while wildfires burn out of control across major parts of Los Angeles. And let's start there by chatting about Los Angeles. You live just around the corner. Terrible scenes, unbelievable scenes, to be honest, with wildfires, being fanned by these winds. Lots of people being killed. Offices, homes, shops, churches, community buildings destroyed in one of the wealthiest parts of the world. Having lived in the region for 40 years, how does it look from your side of the Atlantic?
First of all, the wildfires are, an incredible tragedy, but it's not a sort of a failure of infrastructure that's the result of this. You've got to realize that geographically we sit on the edge of the world's largest ocean, and we sit in an area of tectonic plate activity. We have earthquakes every day. We have an earthquake in California.
Yeah.
And so we design buildings to be flexible, and generally here they're made of wood, and wood is, it's tinder. And so we build these buildings to survive major events like earthquakes by being flexible structures. And as a result of that, they're vulnerable to other natural disasters like fires. And we have had, for a variety of reasons, we've had some very dry years. And the result of that is we had last winter, we had a very wet winter, and the grass grows very high in a wet winter. And then we have a very dry period of months. And so we've got this sort of combination of tinder structures with very dry grass.
Well, politically, there are many narratives coming out right now about whose fault it is, who's to blame, etc. But given what you've just said, was this therefore a foreseeable disaster?
I think that they are foreseeable. I have an app on my phone which watches fires across the United States. We're aware this is a recurring problem in the region, and there's not much we can do about it. To be honest, we could fireproof every home, but they would become more vulnerable to earthquakes because we would be fireproofing them in heavier material that would shake more, that would be accelerated more by the waves that come from earthquakes. And so we live, it's everything is about probability, right? We live in an area in which we're making value-based judgments about how best to create resilient structures. And
Yeah.
and there is a fire risk for everybody in California who's next to open space, which I am. And in that area, that particular area of California in Los Angeles, there's a lot of trees, there's a lot of grass. And so, if
Yeah.
the wind comes from the east, which it has, it's called the Diablo wind, the devil wind, for a reason, because it's hot and dry, and that combination causes these fires.
So, on the basis that fires are not you, it isn't really a surprise you get fires. Clearly, Donald Trump has very blatantly blamed the Democrats for failing to manage the system, failing to prepare. Does he have a point? Is it legitimate to say that the water systems in this known tinderbox that is prone to fires have been left unprepared, or that the fire departments were left underfunded or ill-prepared? Is that legitimate?
I don't believe so. I believe that first of all, the political argument that I understand from what Trump is making is in his last term, he had a policy disagreement in California about water with Gavin Newsom. And there was some environmental issues about water that was potentially being taken and used for farmers in the Central Valley from Northern California. And he's conflating that with the fires for political reasons. But set that aside. I mean, that's just noise, right? That doesn't help anybody. It doesn't save anybody's homes. The things that could have been done better is there's no question that forest management could be done better. It has been much more heavily funded in recent years than it has been previously, but nevertheless, there is a risk, from the forests. Equally, the overhead power lines are more vulnerable to causing fires than below ground power lines, and we have a lot of overhead power lines. PG&E, the largest provider in California, has been going through a process of putting the lines underground and reducing the risk. And there's also a lot of monitoring that's going on. There's a lot of remote monitoring that takes place now, albeit with drones or cameras, trying to identify fires as soon as they start, as quickly as possible. But we're in a transition period. We're in a period where infrastructure is being invested in. It's not all resolved. Do I think there are people to blame for this? Well, there'll be a lot of time after the fires have been put out to look at whether the mistakes were made. I don't really know, but I don't see it. I don't think it's obvious that there've been huge errors and mistakes been made by either local or federal government. The issue right now is to try and get those fires under control.
Absolutely. I suppose once they're under control, then we can start having the discussion about exactly how
And
prepared they were. But I'm sure you will, dear. But I suppose the obvious root cause of a fire like this has surely to be levelled at climate change. Some politicians, not least the incoming administration, the president and administration, will perhaps disagree. But to what extent do you think that people in the US or people in California are now looking at this event and thinking, yes, this is a moment for inflection. This is the time we actually wake up to the realities of climate change? Or is that a little bit too far-fetched? I don't know.
I love the sentiment. I mean, as I understand it, I was in China a few weeks ago, and as I understand it, the general population of China, around 70% of the people believe that climate change is a human-induced or exacerbated problem, and the government should do something about it. In the United States, that number's about half of that, about 35%. Right. So do I think that the fires in Los Angeles are going to change US public opinion with regard to climate change? No, not at all. There are problems in the east regarding hurricanes and flooding and sea level rise in Florida and so on and so forth. So this single event is not going to be a pivotal moment in changing the public's opinion about whether we should be doing something about climate change. I also don't think you can draw a correlation between these fires and climate change. There is no doubt that it's been drier in recent years.
Yeah.
And there is no doubt. But fires have happened forever. And this is not a new phenomena. 20 years ago, there were no fires, and now there are. Not true. there have been fires, forever in California. So I think we've got to look at this as a recurring problem. We've got to try and reduce the incidence of this problem. We've got to try and make homes more safe, and that means maybe not building in areas of high risk, a bit like the UK building on floodplains. Maybe we shouldn't be building in fire-prone areas. We've got to try and we've got a massive problem with insurance in California. The insurance losses from this fire will affect everybody after the fire, and the insurers are pulling out of the marketplace because of the risk. And so it will become unaffordable to have a home in a fire risk area. So after this fire, there will be consequences. There'll be some blame. I'm sure mistakes have been made. Nobody's perfect. And there will be costs to be paid. But right now, you can't really draw a straight line and say, fundamental mistake has caused this. No, I don't think that's true.
Well, Steve, what is happening right now? I mean, you're quite a long way from the fires, but you're in that part of the world. Do you get a sense of the fires coming under control? What are the projections in terms of containing the fires and putting them out now?
Oh, the fire departments are very good at reporting containment. They had, last I saw, they'd got sort of on the Palisades fire, they'd got something like 20% containment. I haven't looked today. There's an app I might even be able to show you if you're interested. The app I use, it's called Watch Duty. So I'm just loading it up. So here's a picture of California, and you can click on any one fire. So if I click on the Palisades fire, it says right now it's 31% contained, and so that will gradually improve. Hopefully as weather conditions help the firefighters. And they start to create fire breaks in the right places. Because you have to make a choice at which point you're gonna put your barriers up and try and fight it.
You have to decide where you're going to hold the line to. But I suppose what the big question that I suppose that people are looking at is what happens next to rebuild, because you see on the television pictures of these absolute wastelands, completely destroyed areas. What happens next? Who goes in there to try to start the process of rebuilding? Is it a federal issue? Is it a state issue? Is it a private issue? I mean, who takes the lead on all this?
Well, it's a combination of things. So first of all, when I was evacuated from here, the fire came to us from the west.
This was not recently.
5 years ago.
5 years.
And the whole hillside was on fire. So I face out over open space, and I can see hills for about 20 miles to the west of me. And the whole hillside was on fire. After the fire was put out, the whole hillside was black. And I think that happened in November. By January, it was green. You would never have known that there was a fire. So nature is incredibly resilient. So first of all, these areas nature will grow back. Construction will take longer. The problem will be that there will be federal buildings that are damaged. There will be state schools that are damaged, and there will be homes that are damaged. And rebuilding will take longer because the construction industry doesn't have the capacity to deal with these issues. They take a long time, and also the cost of rebuilding will be surge pricing will come into the marketplace. It happened in Napa with the big fires in Napa and Sonoma. Contractors, when demand outstrips supply, prices go up. And the insurance costs will not cover the surge price construction. So it will take a long time to get back to normal, but it will happen. It will occur.
Well, presumably there are precedents. I mean, I'm thinking, the Katrina hurricane wiped out huge parts of New Orleans, for instance. I mean, they presumably provide, and you've talked about the fire, previous fires. I mean, they must provide some kind of framework that people go through in terms of how you get back on your feet.
Well, unfortunately, if you have a mortgage on a home and it gets burnt down, you still have an obligation to the bank to repay the loan. So, so individuals, unfortunately, it will be catastrophically economically devastating for some people, as it was with Katrina. I mean, in that area, many homes are still not even rebuilt today from Katrina. So
What's right? People have left the area and never gone back, haven't they?
yes, yes, and you might choose that. If you were a family and you'd suffered through that, you may not want to put yourself in that area of risk
Yeah.
again.
But clearly the contracting and the design sector is going to get involved early, are they, to help stabilise the situation? I mean, are there design firms now who are kind of like trying to be brought in to bring in new ideas about how to redesign these areas? Because if you've got a whole district which has been destroyed, then it's an opportunity to redesign it, presumably.
Yeah, I like that philosophically. The reality is that yes, there are more companies that make modular buildings today, and so you could build much faster, but the problem is a capacity problem. The US construction industry is an aging industry. It's
Hmm.
generally custom buildings made by hand. So people, still put nails in wood with. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
they use guns today rather than hammers, but they still put nails in wood, and construction is generally homes are generally hand built. There
Yeah.
isn't the capacity in the marketplace to deal with something like this. And as far as new materials go, the US, like many other places, has become a first cost driven marketplace. So construction, homes are largely unaffordable for people. So the ratio between the cost of a home and the average household income is as high as it's ever been as a ratio. And so people try to build as cheaply as possible. And unfortunately, that's not the way to provide resiliency
No.
in a structure. And so I have no doubt that some people will lose everything. The wealthy people will rebuild something maybe better than it was before, and there'll be a whole train of things that sit in between. But it will take years.
A huge challenges. I mean, for this part of the world, not least because it's a democratic state under a Trump administration after he gets sworn in for his second term. And I suppose that is the second big issue that I wanted to chat through with you, Steve. But before we do that, just talk a bit more about you, Steve, because you're ICE's representative for the West Coast, and you're a consultant based in San Francisco area, and most recently with Cameron McAllister, I think a design and build specialist. But originally, you spent 30 years with Arup, worked on some pretty impressive projects, as I mentioned, the Birdsnest in Beijing, and the Apple campus. But you're originally from Liverpool, and you studied at Liverpool John Moores University, once known as Liverpool Poly. How did you end up in California for your entire career?
I first of all, I haven't been in California for 40 years. I've been in California for about 20 years.
Right.
And so I worked with Arup and straight from college, and I went around the world with Arup. So went through a few recessions in the UK, generally looked for work overseas, got a taste for international work. I love sport. I got into stadium design. It's a long story, but I got
Right.
involved with Allianz Arena for the World Cup in Munich, Manchester City Stadium for the Commonwealth Games, and so on and so forth. And stadiums are projects that take you around the world because
Yeah.
generally there's nobody in the location who's ever done a stadium. So they usually bring people, experts from the outside. So having done that sort of work, I came across a lot of American consultants who were doing stadium design, and Arup asked me if I'd relocate to San Francisco. So they brought me here, and I do independent consulting, but I also get involved in startups. I'm very interested in trying to change the construction industry.
Yeah.
So I actually have a startup that has developed a sustainable material that is fireproof and would be ideal to fireproof homes in
Right.
California. The fact of the matter is, though, it's not currently cheaper than the material that's used. So my interest is, I am trying to create affordable housing, trying to create some changes in the construction industry, and trying to advise people on what is happening today.
And it's hard though, because I mean you are, as I say, something of a champion for carbon reduction and for technology and transforming the
Yeah.
sector. You did a stint with Katerra,
Yes.
which was a technology-based off-site business, and I think with you could describe it as it was a little bit ahead of its time. I mean, the construction industry is incredibly traditional. It maybe wasn't ready for it.
Yeah, Katerra was a fantastic experience, to be honest. I mean, we raised nearly $2 billion of venture capital and tried to transform the construction industry in one huge, explosive bite. And I had a blast at Katerra, honestly. We
Yeah.
developed some super interesting things. I've continued that. I've taken my learnings from Katera into new startups, and it it was it ahead of its time. In some ways,
Yeah.
yes. In some ways, it was naive, and it was that combination that resulted in its demise.
You're also a podcaster. You run the Genuine Intelligence podcast, and I listened to a few, and it is genuinely a philosophical affair. I mean, what's that all about then?
I think part of it is that I met through one of my startups. I met Athena Morse. Athena's 30 years younger than me, and we had a lot of conversations offline as friends about how she saw the world. And I started to say, "Gosh, I think I am very I only look down one end of the telescope. I've had a career. I've been fortunate to make some money and invest wisely, and so I'm in a good position. But from her perspective, it's very different, and she was looking at a world as a 30-year-old in a different way than I looked at it when I was 30 years of age, and I started to realize I didn't really understand the world through her eyes. And
Hmm.
so it's philosophical because I said, well, let's try and take our offline discussions and put them online so that people can see. They realize they're not alone in being very worried. You've got to imagine if you're 30 years of age, it's just constant bad news. And if you say to yourself, do I want to have a family and bring children into this world? The answer is no. It's going to get more horrible. And I say, actually, no, it's not. All it is that new bad news travels faster than good news, and that's all you're hearing. And number one, maybe you want to stop listening to all this bad news, and maybe you got to say to yourself, I'm a tiny little cork bobbing on the ocean. If I just focus on me and what makes me happy, I can have a great, fun, fulfilled life without having to worry about what's going on in the Ukraine.
Yeah.
And so we tried to put that on air, but that was our philosophy.
No, well, I'd recommend go and have a listen. Check it out. The Genuine Intelligence podcast. You left Arup and say you did a stint with Aecon and then WSP, and maybe that was just testing the water, finding out what you missed in the other companies around the world. I don't know, but I have to ask you this: as a stadium designer from Liverpool, is the new Everton Stadium any good?
Oh, it's really good. It's really good. It's really good. And I mean, I hate Liverpool Football Club, but I have sympathy for Everton Football Club, and it's nice that the good side, the blue side of that city, is getting a new stadium ahead of the red side. So good on them. Bit like happened in Manchester. Unfortunately, I'm a Manchester United fan, and the blue side got a new stadium before we did. So good luck to them, and hopefully they can replicate Manchester City. I suspect not, but yeah, it's a great stadium, and the guy who designed it, Dan Meese, is a great designer. He's a world class stadium architect. They've got a great team. I'm sure it'll be a very successful project.
And they did manage to bring some innovation in terms of the way they built it as well, with a lot of offsite construction. Laing O'Rourke did certainly push some boundaries there.
Lango,
Back
great,
to
great fan.
yeah, back to the US though, and the Trump presidency. It is a big moment for the US, a big moment for the world. To be honest, I mean, after such a divided and angry campaign, has the US now collectively got its head around the impending Trump government?
Yeah, I think, I actually think that I think Trump gets some bad press. First of all, it's not that the head of the U.S. federal government has a sphere of influence. There is no doubt, and there's no doubt that international trade can be affected and likely will be affected by the Trump presidency, and that there's this movement towards nationalism, which you've seen in many other countries around the world right now. I mean, there is a trend towards, nationalist sort of governments,
Populism, yeah.
and it's and the US has gone in that direction, but it's called the United States of America for a reason, and the states have the largest influence on day-to-day life. And you talked about California and the fires. The way that California operates will impact me much more than how the federal government operates. And yes, Trump has control of Social Security and Medicare. We have an aging population, and anybody who's in my age group is going to wonder about what is the future of Social Security and Medicare. But do I think that, for example, you talked about climate change. Do I think that federal government policies on climate change will have a significant impact in the market? No.
Right.
I don't believe so. I think states have their own path to net zero. That companies that do this, the implementers, which are mostly companies, have they're global companies. They have their own path to net zero. We're in a movement towards electrifying the infrastructure. It's irreversible. Drill, baby, drill. Well, we're already drilling more than we've ever drilled in history for oil. And really there is, we cannot influence global prices of gas at the pump through drilling more in the United States. So
you sound incredibly positive about it. It's positive in that they say the federal government can't necessarily change the direction if the private sector is going in that direction. But there is a lot of investment going into solar power, to wind turbines, to many other projects, renewable projects across the US. And I presume that the private sector say they're not just going to walk away from that.
Yeah, you have to realize the United States, first of all, the United States is a very large country. And if we just think about it as a country, it's not a big population. It's only 350 million people. There are no mega cities really in the United States. New York's 8.5 million people. So 40% of the United States land is farming. 40% of the land is farming. And so what you've got is this not very dense, dispersed population across the United States. And that's what the government controls. And so most of the decisions are made locally. California is driven by two large cities, maybe 2.5 with San Diego, and they determine the GDP of California. So how does the federal government change that? Not very much, to be honest.
No. But it has had major subsidies for renewables through the Inflation Reduction Act, that has driven renewable growth in the US. And frankly, the world has looked on with a combination of admiration for this policy, but also with kind of some amount of shock, because it has sucked a lot of the investment out of the rest of the world. If that is switched off, is it likely to have a major? It surely will have a major impact in terms of where the investment goes.
Well, you got to. I mean, the first thing is, Trump is going to be in office for 4 years. Right. Climate change is not a 4-year problem. Climate change is a 100-year problem at a minimum. Maybe it's a 500-year problem. So yes, there may be some setbacks along the path to becoming more sustainable, but it's a blip. It will be over. It's not like the government has a lot of money. We're in a massive debt. So it's not like the federal government is going to be able to pass some enormous act with trillions of dollars associated with it that turns the United States in a different direction. No. The money is not available to do that. So, Trump will be managing a meager budget. Most of it goes towards the military, Medicare, and Social Security. He'll have Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy telling him at the areas that he might cut. And there will be opposition to that. And he has a relatively thin margin in Congress. So we're likely to see a lot of noise and a lot of headlines, but much less action.
So from an infrastructure perspective, I mean, when you get the gathering of the institutions, civil engineers, West Coast representatives, and they bring them all together, is it a collective moment of hope or despair in terms of driving growth into the sector?
No, it's not despair. I mean, infrastructure, it used to be called public works, so which I quite like as a better name than infrastructure. The work we do is for the public. And the US has a problem, right? You have to be able to travel from place to place. And we have aging infrastructure that is need of an upgrade, right? There is no doubt that the US, and Trump recognized this in his first term, was unable to pass an infrastructure bill. So there's history here. Biden did some good work with the Inflation Reduction Act. But nonetheless, if you look at the American Society of Civil Engineers scorecard. They produce what like a school
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
scorecard for US infrastructure. I'd recommend anybody to look at it. It's fantastic as a presentation of the state of the nation's infrastructure. We're in dire need of investment.
Yeah.
We have something like 20,000 bridges that are currently unsafe for use,
Yeah.
and they're used every day. So,
Well,
that's where
yeah.
the money needs to go.
Well, that's the third part of what I wanted to talk to you today, Steve. It is about this, what has to happen, because as you say, the ASC's next State of the Nation comes out in March, I think, and when it comes to infrastructure, as you point out, it has been chronically underinvested. So, I mean, where are the hotspots? Where does that investment need to go into? You talked about bridges, but where else?
Oh, I think it's sort of the glib answer is everywhere. But if we break it down a little bit, the right now most intercity transportation in the United States, because of population size and distance, is done by air. And
Yeah.
so there is no doubt that the US, which is it's sort of ironic, how the West was won was by, railways. The situation now is that we don't really have any high-speed rail connections of note in the United States between the high population centers. So California high-speed rail has been talked about, and it's been a project as long as I've been in the United States, 20 years. There's
Mm.
really nothing much. There's something at each end. There's really no connection between the cities. So I think there has to be a focus on high speed rail because the airports can't really expand anymore, and aviation is not a very sustainable way to transport people between places. So no
Yeah.
doubt there has to be an upgrade of the infrastructure to electrify, because whilst there are electric vehicles, there really isn't an energy infrastructure in place for for national distributed renewable energy. So right now, people are putting solar panels. There are a lot of incentives to distribute solar, for example, everywhere. But the
Yeah.
grid isn't ready. The grid isn't ready for it, and
Yeah.
so there has to be a significant upgrade of the energy grid. And then, really, finally, I would say, well, two final things. One is that the water infrastructure in the United States is under stress. So, we have had the distribution, because of the changing climate, the distribution of water is changing, and there needs to be something about how we can better distribute water to the areas that need it, because we've got places like Las Vegas where Lake Mead levels have been going down year after year. The Colorado River doesn't even reach the delta, the Gulf
Hmm.
anymore. It stops 150 miles short because of the water that we're taking out of it. There needs to be a sort of federal view agreed with the states of better water distribution across the nation. And then the final thing is the current infrastructure needs to be upgraded because the way money has been cut from the maintenance budgets, and that's why these things like bridges and dams are falling into a state of repair. I mean, here in California, we have a lot of earth dams
Yeah.
that are not very well maintained and they're old, and
Yeah.
an earthquake will bring a number of those down, and that will be a huge disaster for the area and for the people
So,
who live here.
and that just comes down to better ways of managing and maintaining that infrastructure. And of course, there's a lot of talk about using technology, using AI, using digital and data technology to really speed that up and to make it more efficient. Uh, is it being grasped in the US sufficiently?
Oh yeah, there's no doubt the US is grasping. I hear all the time that the construction industry is slow to adopt new technology, and that's just not true. The US is the construction industry is very quick to grasp new technology, but it's a most highly regulated industry in the world, and so you can't do it if you can't get approvals. Projects have to go through city, state, and federal
Yeah,
approval.
that's the same planning problems we have in the UK.
Yeah, it's not the construction industry's problem. It's the regulatory framework that is the problem that is preventing progress. But nevertheless, the US national debt is as high as it's ever been. It's not like we have the funds. We've got to find a way. We have a problem with unaffordable housing. We have a homelessness problem across the United States. and housing is generally unaffordable. We have a problem with national debt, and then we have a problem of aging infrastructure. Something's got to change. And
Yeah.
do I think Trump will bring a shock to the system? Yes, but maybe we need that because
Yeah.
we can't continue down the path that we're on, honestly.
Well, finally, Steve, it's a big week, as I say. It's a big 4 years ahead for the US, as I say, as Trump really rolls out. It's going to be an unpredictable roller coaster, I'm sure. If you put yourself back 20, 30 years when you first came to the US, would you advise that for a young gun from Liverpool to do the same thing? Is it the place to go? Is it a place to go and work?
Oh, yes. I mean, I'm so blessed. I mean, every day, my wife and I say how lucky we are to live where we live. I mean, we have, a beautiful climate. It's a lovely place to live. I mean, our standard of living is great. I'm not down on the UK, but I did hate the grey skies in the winter. I play golf. I played twice this week in shirt sleeves. I really enjoy living here, and it's a great place. There's a can-do attitude in the United States, and it's still a place where you can practice, you can be innovative, and you can enjoy your work.
Yeah.
People are very nice. I mean, generally, whatever you might read, I know the bad news makes the newspapers, but generally, people here are good and they're nice and they're helpful. We have great friends. I recommend traveling the world. Honestly, it opens your mind, and I've been
Yeah.
lucky enough to do that. Yeah.
Steve, well, we're going to call it a day in this conversation now. Before we get too much hate mail towards you, we're envying your lifestyle there. I don't know anything else. But look, thanks so much for joining me today on the Infrastructure Podcast. Really interesting and really challenging times particularly in Los Angeles, as the city recovers from this tragedy and this unprecedented natural disaster. But really challenging times for the US under this new and quite unpredictable administration. So thanks very much for giving us your perspective.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking me.
Thanks, Steve. Well, that's all we've got time for today, but we have more from the Infrastructure Podcast in the pipeline and more guests to talk to as we continue to probe the big issues faced across the sector. If you haven't done so already, do check out the Infrastructure Podcast website, www.infrastructure-podcast.com, where you'll find background information and all the latest podcasts to listen to and to share. So thanks for joining us. Thanks again to Steve, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon.